afternoon, bye. Bon après-midi, tout le monde. We are ready to get started in our Down East by room. Our first session of this afternoon is Underrepresented in Tech, the journey to amplify others. Our next speaker is Michelle Frechette. Michelle lives outside Rochester, New York, but is no stranger to the WordPress community in Ontario and Quebec. She is a mentor, a helper, and an honorary Canadian. Hey? Hey? Michelle is the Director of Community Engagement for Stellar WP at Liquid Web. She also hosts and co-hosts several podcasts, is the co-founder of underrepresentedintech.com, and is the executive director at poststatus.com. And that only begins to scratch the surface of everything she does. Please, let's have a warm round of applause to welcome Michelle.
Thank you. I really love WordPress. And it's not even just the software, it's the people. So that's why the list is long, because as long as I'm here on the earth, I want to do good things for good people. And part of that is what I'm here to talk to you about today. Little frog in my throat, so bear with me if I have to clear my throat a little bit. But today we're talking about underrepresented in tech, the journey to amplify others. And I want to tell you the history of what we've done. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But first, I want to acknowledge that the land we're on wasn't always owned by who sits on it today. The land we're on, and I'm not going to disrespect these communities by trying to pronounce their names and doing a poor job at it. But you can see the communities that once were on today's land. And thank you. And if you want to know where you are in the world, which indigenous community was there first, you can go to whos.land and put in if you have a location already on your device, it will tell you. You can put in your city or your zip code, and it will tell you which indigenous community was there first. And I think that's an important acknowledgement. Moving on to underrepresented in tech, it all began with a conversation between me and Allie Nimmons, where she said, I keep getting asked if I know any black people who could speak at these different events. And I said, oh my goodness, people keep asking me if I know any black people that could speak at events. And we said, what are we going to do about that? How can we fix this? How can we help people? So we said, hey, we did first steps that were incredibly wrong first steps. So don't do what's on here. We said, let's make a spreadsheet of all the black people we know. And Allie is a black woman, so it's not just a couple of white girls talking about black people. But we said, what could we do? Let's make a spreadsheet so that at least when somebody asks, we say, oh, I know these people have spoken at events before. They may be available, and they may be interested in speaking. So we created a Google spreadsheet we could share. But we quickly realized this was not the best way to keep a list of people who may or may not be interested in being referred out. So what you're going to see now are actual screenshots from our Twitter conversation back and forth, different snapshots throughout this project. But we talked about originally, let's make a directory, like the spreadsheet directory. And Allie said, well, Christy, a friend of ours, said, we probably shouldn't publish a directory without people saying, yes, I want to be in your directory. Oh yeah, that just makes sense, right? We live in the States where privacy really nobody cares about, so we hadn't thought about that. But it turns out it's a really important issue, and of course we know this. But she said it would be cooler if we created something where a user submits their own information, like outspokenwomen.io. So I said, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Underrepresentedintech.com is available. She's like, oh, that would be perfect. I said, I'll buy it. And before we even went any further step, you don't see the next bit was I bought it, right? It turns out that's a really long URL, and I wish that we had perhaps chosen something else, but it really states who we are and what we're here to talk about. which is raising the voices, amplifying the opportunities for people who are underrepresented, not just in WordPress, although that is the lion's share of what we do, but also in the tech community. And so we labeled it something, we created a title that didn't pigeonhole it to a specific group of people, but allowed people outside of WordPress also to be involved. So Underrepresented in Tech was created. She said, I think we should still keep adding names to the spreadsheet, because then we can reach out to those people and say, would you like to be involved? We are not going to put you in without your permission. But this became the group of people that we kind of got proof of concept with and got buy-in from, and who said, you're missing this category or this information on your intake form. Those people who were the first 20, 25 people that got into the database were so invaluable to us, because their feedback helped create what you have available to you today, which is underrepresentedintech.com. So before I go any further, let me tell you what it is. You may not be familiar. So underrepresentedintech.com is obviously a website. We all know .com is a website. I'm over-explaining, I know, but bear with me. It is a database of people who fit underrepresented categories. So whether you are older in tech, like me, you're a disabled person, like me, but I'm white, so I'm not everybody who's underrepresented in tech. There are people in our database who are Hispanic. There are people who are Black. There are people who are part of the LGBTQ community. There are people who are older. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some, not neurodivergence. If there's something that could, if you belong to a category of people for whom representation becomes difficult, you are welcome in our database. And so we create the database. You're welcome to upload a photo, but you don't have to, because we never tell the community at large what your underrepresented status is. It is not my job to out somebody who's in the LGBTQ community who doesn't want to be outed. It is not my job to say, oh yeah, that person doesn't walk well, or that person's a Black person, or that person is really old, or whatever it is, right? So that's not my job to do that, and it's not my purview to share your information. We do ask that information on the intake form just to vet that we're making sure that the people who are in the database are in an underrepresented category. We don't verify that. We're not calling your friend saying, are they really gay? Is she really Black? And we're not doing those things, of course, right? But what we're doing is we're just making sure that you are identifying under one of the categories that we include. What does that do? That puts you in a database that can then be searched in two ways. And no, I don't have it up here. You'll have to look it up yourself. But it identifies you in two ways. So let's say that I am searching the database, and I want to make sure that I have underrepresented people on my podcast. I can go to the search function. I can say I want to talk to somebody who's interested in SEO or WordPress and who wants to be on a podcast. And those things will come together and create a list, a directory, that you can scroll through and be like, oh, wow, I know Nyesha. She's in there. I'm picking on you because you're in the database. And she wants to be on a podcast. I'm going to contact Nyesha. So a couple of things people said to us, why aren't you monetizing this? First of all, underrepresented people already pay too much money and don't get enough pay for what they do. As a disabled person, when I travel, I have to tip people. You're not tipping somebody to push you in a wheelchair through an airport, but I am. I can't go grocery shopping and carry my groceries in, so I have my groceries delivered through Instacart, which means I'm paying a delivery fee, which means I'm paying a tip, and sometimes if they go above and beyond, I'm giving them an extra tip. So it costs more money to be disabled than other people think it might. It costs more money to be an ethnic minority in a lot of ways than it does to be white, because you're not necessarily making the same amount of money as people, and you might have to work extra hours to be able to afford a job, a livelihood. And so people who are in underrepresented categories are already taxed enough. So we decided anybody who's underrepresented can be in the database and it's free. So then people said, well, why aren't you charging people to search the database? And the answer to that was, we don't want to put barriers up in any way, shape, or form for underrepresented people to be found. There are so many organizations who just wouldn't pay for that. And we weren't looking to make money off of underrepresented in tech. We just wanted it to survive. We wanted it to be a resource to the community. And so that's what it is. And that's how we functioned it. So then she says, I'd really like to continue to move forward on this because I'm kind of a busy person and sometimes things fall by the wayside. And I don't know, I didn't have a date. So we're not talking like just a couple months, right? We're trying to get this project up and running. Could she have time on Friday? I'm like, yes, absolutely Friday for sure. Then she's like, well, I had a chance to read through some of the feedback. It really warmed my heart. People were so happy and supportive. Did you get more submissions on Friday? I said, yes, the conversation was much the same. Everybody thought it was a good idea, but no new submissions yet. And I love this. It is. We're geniuses. I mean, who doesn't want to think that, right? So then we launched it. We went past this proof of concept, getting people's opinions, getting some feedback, tweaking things as we went. We launched it. We were overwhelmed by the positive community. Various WordPress newsletters, podcasts, they included information about the launch. They had us on their podcast. They interviewed us for their newsletters to talk about why we were doing it, how it worked. People started putting themselves in the database. And yes, at the first, it was people we knew. The first time that people entered the database and neither one of us knew that person, it was like, yes, this worked, because it's reached now beyond our sphere of people that we know into the greater community. Like goosebumps. I still get goosebumps when I think about that. Sorry, I bumped my mic. Then people started tweeting about it. We started presenting at meetups, which sometimes was funny. So I presented at a meetup online, because this was all during the pandemic. This is all 2020. Presented at a meeting online to a group in Georgia, and they were like, wow, this is really cool. Georgia, the United States, by the way, not Georgia, the country. And they thought it was really cool. So then Nigel Rogers, who is in Zimbabwe, he said, would you present to my meetup? Absolutely. Allie was not available, so it was this white girl presenting online into Zimbabwe. All men. There were 20 black men on the screen. And one of them said, why do we need this? We're not underrepresented here. And I said, no, I'm pretty much the only white face in this crowd. But do you want to operate just in Zimbabwe, or would you like to be identified within the global community? And then it was like the light went on for them. Like, yes, maybe locally we are the majority, but in the whole global community still faced that minority type status. And when those light bulbs came on and people started from around the world entering the database, much more goosebumps. Then we started presenting at WordCamps. I gave a talk at WordCamp Asia this year about how we can be allies for one another. I've given talks at other local meetups in Montclair and Rochester and other places about how we can be allies for other people. But do you want to know what happens when you start to elevate underrepresented people? You get hate. And we got hate. And I've purposely blurred out the names because it doesn't matter who it was, and I don't want to give them any more platform. But somebody's like, wah ha ha ha, their pick is a bunch of men and only a couple of women. Is there a place on here for Republican, capitalist women in WordPress? Ha 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 ha. And that hurt. But it also lit a big, huge fire. Wait, they make money doing this? LOL. Oh my God, the hypocrisy. Because people were begging us to put away on our website that they could support the work we were doing. Using the victims for profit, nice one. Show of hands, if you are in a minority status, an underrepresented status, do you think of yourself as a victim? Because I don't. You don't have to really raise your hand. But just because you are an underrepresented person does not make you a victim. That's not to say that underrepresented people aren't beaten, aren't victimized in other ways, but just by virtue of being underrepresented is not victimhood. And that irritated the heck out of me. And then the bottom was the hallmark of all Democrats since Tammany Hall. And that is a big, huge thing that happened back in whatever it was in the US. Clearly, and these were two women, I will say that much, who were attacking a project that sought to amplify women and other minorities. But evil doesn't always win. As a matter of fact, evil seldom wins. It may win battles, but it never wins the war. People then really started in earnest saying, how can we support you? We had a way that people could donate in-kind sponsorships. So Ninja Forms, Gravity Forms, all of these different, I can't think of off the top of my head, all of the different Give WP, like we got software donated to us. That's all we were looking for, was a way for people to give us a break on spending money. We weren't looking to make money. But people saw the hate that was coming our way and said, we want to support you financially so that this continues to go forward. Now, I will tell you, we did sell sponsorships to the podcast, which I'm going to talk about later because there were production costs around that. But the amount of money that's just been donated was about $1,200 total. And if you take $1,200, divide it over 2 people, and several hundred hours to get this thing up and running, I think we figured we made 15 cents an hour off of our donation. So clearly it wasn't about that for us. It was really nice to be able to get pizza that night, like that kind of thing, right? But we are not trying to make money because we don't try to profit off of anybody, first of all. We've only ever wanted to keep the doors open, so to speak, right? Companies started inquiring about sponsorship. And here's the thing. We did allow companies to sponsor the podcast. Again, I'll talk about that in a minute. But we have never taken sponsorship dollars for the project because we never wanted any company to be able to say, see how diverse we are, see how much we value diversity? We sponsor underrepresented in tech. So we didn't want to be tokenized in any way. In the same way, we don't want underrepresented people to be tokenized. Our tagline is representation without tokenization. I have been the only woman in a panel before. Allie had been the only black person in a panel before or in a conference. We know what it's like to be tokenized, and nobody should ever be tokenized, and we don't want that to happen. So we don't allow people to sponsor us in a way that would just allow us to be their token. Look how great we are as a company. And our database numbers started to grow. More and more people decided they wanted to be found, not because they were underrepresented, but because of the wonderful things they could do. The people in that database are incredibly talented at speaking, at coding. You can hire somebody for a full-time gig, for a part-time gig, seasonal work, that kind of thing. People are searching for worker in the database. There's so many different ways you can choose people. But then, what good is a database if it's just sitting there? People started using it. I mean, you want to talk about goosebumps. I had the chicken pox. They were so big, This was so exciting when we started to get feedback. I hired somebody. I had somebody on my podcast. Somebody who works with me now said, I found a job through your database. That was so cool, right? It's so exciting to know that it was working, that the purpose for what we were doing was actually good. And here's the other thing, I'm in marketing. I know marketing. I know how people feel about you shouldn't have projects that you can't even pull all this information about. But we don't even know when you're getting contacted if you're in our database, because we don't have forms on there that we track it. You put how you want to be contacted. You can put an email address. You can put a link to your form on your website. You can put a link to your LinkedIn or your Twitter. People can contact you how you want to be contacted. So we don't even know. And it's okay for us not to know that because we know that we're still doing good work. So what happened next? We decided that vlogging was not dead. And we had a vlog where we video recorded ourselves over Zoom, talking about not only why we're doing underrepresented in tech, but starting to talk about hard-hitting issues around underrepresented folks in the world and in tech specifically. I remember we talked about Juneteenth, which is a holiday in the US where the last freed slaves finally knew 2 years later that they were free. They had continued in slavery without ever hearing that. And so Juneteenth is a celebration on June 19th, the US, about that day and the jubilation that came because people realized and knew that they were finally free. And one of our early episodes talks about the fact that there was a Walmart who had on display fried chicken and watermelon to celebrate Juneteenth, which is incredibly, incredibly a hateful, racist thing to do. So we talk about things that sometimes make people uncomfortable. And we decided we were only going to have a vlog. Okay, that lasted 9 episodes, but before we were like, we should make this a podcast. So we had a podcast instead. And weekly, we would talk about, I'll be honest with you, we never knew what we were going to talk about week to week. We would get on our Zoom call, and the first 15 minutes would be like, what do you want to talk about? And over the course of the week, we would have noticed this issue or that issue. At Christmas time, we would talk about advertising and how advertising was either racist or not racist and things like that were happening. We talk about ableism. We talk about, if you look across here, we talked with Josepha Hayden Champosi about what it was like to be first generation in the United States working here from another country. We talked to Naisha, your face is right there. I don't even remember what we talked to you about, but we talked to you about something. We talked to Dan Mabey, who is the director of Big Orange Heart. We talked about mental health and what mental health means and what kinds of stigmas come with mental health. I am somebody who deals with depression and anxiety. And for me, mental health is a huge issue. And I want to destigmatize mental health. And so we talk about that there. We talked with Maestro Stevens. We talked with Leslie Sim. We talked with people around the world. Leslie is an Asian woman who's running a really cool company right now, you know? So we talked with these different people. But most of our podcasts were one-on-one, just sitting, talking about hard-hitting issues. And then we thought, you know, there's so many companies who are doing things so wrong. And so we started to talk about how could we help companies do better. So one company had talked to me the year before we even started any of this and said, there aren't very many women applying for the support and dev roles at our company. What do you think is wrong? And I hadn't looked at that application ever before, right? Like I don't know, I had a job. So I went and looked at their application. And the page started with the job title, the description, and then it said, if you think you are right for this role, apply below. And I thought, if you think are 2 words that often will cause somebody who is an underrepresented person to say, it's probably not me. Because now I'm thinking, am I? Do I? Do I just think it? Am I? And so we changed the way that was worded. And the application started to be a little more women. Because we get to that point, and you're no longer saying, if you think, it just says, you've basically like, you've seen it, apply here, kind of thing. There's no reason to put doubt. Don't you want more applications? Even if half of them don't qualify, don't you want to know? You don't want 3 applicants, you want more applicants. And you want a more diverse group of applicants. And so changing words like that makes a difference. I relayed that experience to Allie, and she's like, why don't we also create some services on diversity and inclusion? So we created a couple different packages, right? Like, hey, pick our brain for an hour. And then we had this like marketing thing, and we had something where we would just evaluate your whole website and tell you what you were doing wrong, what you could improve, those kinds of things. Most companies don't want anybody to know that they weren't doing something right. So our thing was, we will never tell anybody that you came to us and used our services. But there are companies that you know in WordPress who came to us and used our services. Ninja Forms gave us permission. I actually messaged James Laws, who's one of the owners there, and said, is it still okay? Can I talk about you tomorrow? And he says, absolutely. And because their mantra is like my mantra, whatever today is, I want to do better tomorrow. Whatever tomorrow is, I want to do better the next day. And so they paid us decent money to evaluate. First, they paid us a pick your brain session, and then they're like, oh, there's so much more. Can we just hire you to do this? And we're like, yeah, let's put some packages together real quick. And so we met with them on Zoom. We did a full evaluation of their website. We wrote, for recruiting a more diverse applicant pool, we wrote them some tweets and social posts. We helped them rewrite their application page, and they were so happy with the results that they were able to give us a public testimonial, which was super awesome. And so we were able to do that for companies. And I had a full-time job, and I'm doing all of these other things, but it was worth it to take my lunch hours and to take some time in the evening to help companies do better, because that's what underrepresented in tech is about, is being able to level those playing fields better. And then, because we're never happy to just rest on our laurels, as they say, last summer we created a webinar series on what it's like being whatever you are in tech. So, and the most important part of this is that if we qualified or identified with that group, we were not the moderator of that group. So I moderated the what it's like to be a black man in tech. I don't remember who did the others. Naisha was one of our moderators, and Allie was one of our moderators, but we had one about what it's like being disabled in tech, what it's like being a non-developer in tech, because believe it or not, I'm in marketing, and we get a lot of hate for not being able to code. And I'm like, I know CSS, doesn't that count? What it's like being queer in tech, what it's like being a non-native English speaker, because that's not easy either. And then also what it's like being 25 or younger, because the younger crowds often also face issues coming into. And so those 6 webinars still sit on the website. You're welcome to watch them at any time. And I think the insights that came from the people in those panels is really valuable to be able to learn what it's like being in an underrepresented group in technology. And we really did draw from the WordPress community for this, because that's who we know. And so if you go there, you'll see the different people that were on our panels, and it was truly, truly inspiring to me to not only be able to moderate 2 of them, but to listen to all of them and to learn so much more than I already knew. And then, there's lots of and thens, and then Allie said, I want to do something else now. And I think my time on this project has come to an end, and I have other things that I want to pursue in my passions. I am 55, she is 32. I am to the point where I am in a different part of my life than she is, and she wants to explore other opportunities. And so we had our tiers, and I sent her a Cameo. I didn't know what to do as a thank you for all the time and energy. Like I said, 15 cents an hour was not paying the bills, so it wasn't like either one of us were making money. But how could I truly appreciate her for who she is? This woman loves horror films. I do not love horror films, but I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and so did she. So I went to cameo.com, and I got the woman who played Drusilla to do a cameo to Allie, in which she said, hi, Allie, this is, and I forgot her name, Michelle wants you to know she's dead to you. You're dead to her. But she's just kidding, and she really wants you to do well. And she had actually done a little bit of research on Allie and wished her well in her future endeavors, followed her back on Instagram, some of those kinds of things. So Allie, after she saw it, was like head over heels about this. Was super, super cool. But it was time for Allie to take a step back. At that point, I had to decide, do I close this project? Do I continue this project? And if I continue this project, how on earth am I going to continue this project? And so I decided I was going to take a couple months, went into a little bit of a hiatus, about a 3-month hiatus. I recorded a couple of sessions, 4 sessions actually, with different people who are identified as different underrepresented groups. Eventually I got those published because I was burned out at that point about like the weight of this whole project just being on just my shoulders was a little more than I could think about. And so Yoast, the company, had sponsored Allie's time. So they had been paying her to work on Underrepresented in Tech. Not a ton of money, but enough to help pay the bills. And so I reached out to Taco at Yoast, and I said, I would like to ask Sama Nasser to be my co-host and my project partner going forward in Underrepresented in Tech. I know she reports to you, and I will only ask her if Yoast will sponsor her time during her 40-hour work week, because I don't want another underrepresented person to have to do extra work to help the community. And he said, let me check with my boss, because they'd just been acquired by Newfold in the last few years. He came back to me the very next day and said, absolutely, it's a go. So I got Sama on a video call, and I said, I want you to be my new partner in Underrepresented in Tech. And she cried. So I cried, and she came on the project. So you see her here. And what is wonderful about this is she has been following all along, all the time. She is a huge ally for so many communities. She is a minority person, and she's Palestinian and lives in the Netherlands, and she brings an international perspective that Allie and I didn't have already. And so now we record every Tuesday morning. I just put out an this morning. What was it about? So Shah Jahan Jewel put out an open letter to the WordCamp organizers of 2025 because it falls over, I'm going to say it wrong, I'm so sorry, Eid al-Adha. Close? Anybody? Okay. It's a Muslim holiday, and it's basically the equivalent of Christmas in Islam. And so we recorded that, and that got published this morning. We talk about things that are uncomfortable. We talk about things that make people think, and sometimes we make enemies. And I will be honest and say, I am okay with making enemies when I know that the work I'm doing benefits so many people. I have broad shoulders, I have thick skin. Bring on the slings and arrows to me so that people behind me can have a little bit of an easier path. And Sama was like, I'm in, let's do it. And so we have recent episodes called I Choose the Bear, if you're familiar with the concept, where women are being asked, like, if you were alone in the woods and you had to choose between coming across a man you don't know and a bear, which one would you choose? And by and large, women are saying, I choose the bear. Like, I don't know that guy. I'd rather, I know that a bear is gonna maul me. I don't know what he's gonna do to me. And nobody ever says, after somebody gets mauled by a bear, but what was she wearing? How much had she had to drink? And so we talk about those kinds of things. We talk about whatever's happening in the world. So next week we are talking about, I think it's next week, it might be the week after. We're talking about hijab and niqab, and we're talking about burqas. And we're talking about how, yes, in some cases those are oppressive and repressive things to women, but by and large, every woman that I have ever known who wears a hijab chooses to wear her hijab. And to her, that means something. And how Orthodox Jewish women who are married will cover their hair with a wig or with a tickle or with other things, and how that is their identity and that's how they choose to be. And yet there are governments who are trying to outlaw hijab, and that is not fair to those people. And so we talk about those things, and we make those things public, and we hope everybody listens to every episode, whether you agree or not. And there are lots of people who don't agree, but in a polite way and not a hateful way. But we hope that we sway some people, and at the very least, we hope that we introduce to you concepts that perhaps you haven't ever had to think about before. We talk about, I'm looking over here at Richard, because he and I are working on WP Accessibility Day together as organizers. We talk about accessibility. I have talked about what it's like to be a fat woman, because fat people are often shamed and often undervalued just because my butt's a little bigger than everybody else's, or a lot bigger. We face that, and there are people who are like, oh, you're not supposed to say fat. Look, if I'm fat, I'm allowed to say it. Maybe you don't get to call me that, but I get to call me that, right? So we talk about some of those things. We talk about disability. A few years ago, I attended WordCamp US, the first one after the pandemic, in 2022. And I encountered barrier after barrier after barrier as somebody who uses a mobility device. And by day 3, I was in tears because I was so frustrated. Malcolm's nodding. You read the article. You know exactly what I'm about to say. I wrote an article called 5 Days Without a Shower because my accessible room had a bathtub that I couldn't step over to use. So I was the one, doing the washcloth bath in the bathroom. And the first line of that post said, "That really bad smell at WordCamp, that was me." And then I talked about the things that I came across and how difficult it was. But I'm the person who never just says, "This sucks." I'm the person that says, "This sucks, but this is how it could be better." As a result of that article, there are now guidelines in the WordCamp handbook to talk about accessibility. We now see things like ramps on stages, where before I had to try to walk upstairs. We now see wider aisles that I'm not getting stuck in. Every major WordCamp since that article has messaged me to say, "Is this okay? Can we do this? How wide does it need to be?" And yes, some of those things are Googleable, but I am always so happy to be a resource because it means people are thinking about it. And if they're thinking about me and my device, they're accommodating other people like me. And that's so important. We had at WordCamp US last year, because of what I had done the year before and said the year before, we were able to have an entire disability team, accessibility team, who looked at things, and we had a blind man, Alex Stein was on the team as well. So he was, reviewing the website, making sure all the alt tags were there, making sure all the navigation worked as it should. He was looking at it from a blind man. I was looking at it from a disabled person. We had a neurodivergent person on the team who was thinking about sound and sensory and all of those things. And we were able to create a WordPress event that was as accessible as it possibly could be, given the circumstances of how buildings are laid out, for example. So there's a little bit of a walk between where the event was and where the sponsor hall was. That could not be helped, however. So people who walk with difficulty still encountered some problems, as proof that nothing will ever be perfect. But things don't have to be perfect to continually be better. And that's what we want to do. And that's why Underrepresented in Tech does what it is. So what are we up to now? Well, the good news is we don't take sponsors anymore. I don't have to pay a partner to work with me because Yoast sponsors her time. So I don't have to spend precious time asking people to sponsor and looking for fundraising to be able to afford to have a partner in this event. So we don't ask for sponsorship anymore. We still have in-kind sponsors. They continue to let us use their software. They are wonderful. You'll see them in the footer of our website. We love that. Beth Hannon's group, which is now AccessiCart, did an entire evaluation of our website to try to make it more accessible. I know there's still problems. I know there are things that we can do better, and we are striving to do better. We re-added the video component to our podcast because some people like to watch as opposed to listen to podcasts. And I've discovered on my own podcast that I get as many people on YouTube as I do listening through podcasting. And so we've added back that component so we're reaching more people. We have a monthly newsletter. You will notice if you actually are subscribed that I might have forgotten June. So we missed a month, but we're trying to do better. And I'm adding things to the calendar so that we do that. We're thinking about the future. We're thinking about how can we make this continually better too? How can we make things better by using our voices? But the most important thing is our why. Our why is because underrepresented people still need allies. They still make less money on average than typically abled white people, especially white men. And I have no hate for white men. It's just that the rest of us need to be able to do what you all have access to as well. Underrepresented people still get hate. My daughter's a biracial woman. She's been spit on. She's been followed around in stores. She's been accused of potentially going to steal from a store. So she's literally just minding her own business. They still get hate. Underrepresented people still face oppression. We still face unemployment. But underrepresented people matter. Underrepresented people contribute. And underrepresented people are amazing. So this is our hope. This is what we hope, not only that we continue to do, but we do better and do bigger, is we want level playing fields. We want applications that everybody feels that they should read the description and absolutely hit submit at the bottom of that page. We want more room at the table for people who are underrepresented. I give another talk about how we can be better allies, and my final punchline, if you will, is that, guys, the table is metaphorical. We can make more room if we want to. It isn't a physical table. We're not trying to shove people in a boardroom. We can make more room at the table. We're looking for opportunities and representation. We want equity, inclusion, diversity, belonging. I put them in the wrong order. You've heard DEIB before. To me, all of it's important, but that belonging piece is the part that says it's not tokenization. You can look for diversity hires so that your numbers look good. That's tokenization. You could include people so that your numbers look good. Still tokenization. Equity and belonging are not tokenizing people. That is actually saying, I value you for who you are. The last thing I ever want to hear anybody say, and I should have put this on the slide, is, I don't see color, I don't see age, I don't see ability, because we want you to see that. If you say to me that you don't see I'm a disabled person and I'm driving around one of these, I know that you're just saying something because it sounds like it's the right thing to say. If you say to a black person, oh, I don't see color, they're like, that's who I am. It's part of my identity. To say that is to negate who I am at my core. We don't want that. We want you to see who we are, accept us for who we are, and value the things that we can contribute to. So please, please think about all of those things. So what can you do as an ally? Are you hiring? Look at our database. We have a lot of really cool people in there. You can encourage underrepresented people to apply through our database or other places. Absolutely. Are you hosting an event and you want to make sure that you have a more diverse and inclusive lineup of speakers? There are a lot of people in there in that database that want to speak. And whether they're in our database or not, ask people. I will 100% tell you that a lot of underrepresented people won't apply. There's a lot of disabled people who won't apply because they don't know that you're going to put in a ramp for them. They don't know that the aisles are going to be wide enough. There are underrepresented. Allie didn't want to be the only black person on a stage, for example, because then it feels tokenizing. You want to make sure that you're encouraging people to apply, but because a lot of people won't apply because of past experience, you have to ask them to apply. So when I run an event, I say, I would like you to apply to speak. I can't guarantee I will give you a spot if your talk is really terrible, but I have also said to somebody, I want you to speak. What are some topics that you think you can present on? And I'll tell you which one fits in our lineup best so that I can make sure that you're part of our lineup. Because you don't have to do blind applications. You can absolutely seek diversity with high quality. Look at your websites. Do your websites encourage or discourage customers, applicants, engagement? Are you using stock photo that's a bunch of white people and all of them are able-bodied and all of them are young? That is a huge turnoff to everybody else, by the way. But have conversations, ask questions, and please, please, please amplify voices. Underrepresented people have amazingly good things to share. This is where you find me on Twitter. This is my email address. This is underrepresentedintech.com on Twitter. Please follow us. We say a lot of really good things. And this is our website, so you can find us for resources. I am always happy to have conversations. And if you are somebody who wants to have a very difficult conversation because you want to learn, I am there for it. If you're somebody who just wants to harass, find somebody else to do that too. But I will absolutely serve as a resource for you in any way, shape, or form. I appreciate you all for coming to this talk today. It tells me that you want to do better and that you value the things that we do, and I appreciate that so much, so thank you.
Thank you so much. It's not often you get to stand beside a superhero. Thank you so much for all you do. I am so impressed that this passion project, which what started out, I believe, as a passion project, has done so much good in the world. And I am blessed to have
She's gonna make me cry.
her hearing the message. We've got 5 minutes, there any questions?
Yeah,
Are you
of
okay
course.
with questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
If there are any questions,
Naisha.
excellent.
Hi, I'm Niasha, president of the Michelle Frechette fan club. And I wanted to ask, so I know underrepresented in tech is not monetized, and
Right.
you all don't make money off of it. I have a hypothetical for you because
Yes.
I want to know this question, the answer. Say you won the lottery,
Okay.
the big lottery jackpot, like $500 million US, a lot of Canadian dollars. And you just had all of this money and all of this time to devote to UIT, and you could just do anything you wanted with it. Where would you want it to go? Like, where would you want to amplify it to?
Yeah, that's a great question. Wish you told me you were going to have that question before, so I'd have a ready answer. But there are a lot of projects that have shut down in the last few years, and I'm not going to remember. I just saw one the other day, whether it's Girls Who Code. One of them is like shutting their doors. There was another one a few years ago. Women Who Code shut down a few years ago. It breaks my heart that we're not funding things that allow underrepresented groups to learn and grow into the roles that we have within tech. When you underfund or when we have to close the doors on Girls Who Code, Women Who Code, we have just said you're not valuable as coders and developers because we're not going to teach you anymore. And so if I had unlimited resources, I'd be like, yeah, you're opening those doors back up again. Here's the money to do it, right? So, and not just the Girls Who Code, Women Who Code. There are so many things. There's Black Girls Who Code or Black Girls Code. Please don't misquote me, or quote me misquoting them. But those are the kinds of things that I would put money into to make sure that we continue to level those playing fields going forward.
Any other questions?
When there's not a lot of questions, I just think I did such a good job speaking, so thank you.
You did a wonderful job. Thank you very much again. Big hand for Michelle. We'll be back at 2 o'clock for the next session, which is a panel here.